far beyond the reach of any star, drifting through the endless darkness, there exists a world that has never known light. No sunrise, no sky, no warmth, only silence and infinite night. This is a rogue planet, a world that was once part of a system until something went wrong, something powerful enough to throw it out into the void. Now it travels alone, lost in space, with no sun to orbit and no light to guide it. But what truly happens on a planet that never sees the sun? Welcome to Stellar Depth. Don't forget to subscribe, because tonight we're stepping into absolute darkness. In the deepest regions of space, far beyond the warmth of any star, there are worlds that do not belong anywhere. They do not orbit a sun. They do not follow a stable path. They drift, alone. These are known as rogue planets, worlds that were once part of a planetary system until something changed. A gravitational disturbance, a close encounter, a violent shift, enough to break the balance that held them in orbit. And once that balance was lost, the planet was ejected, thrown into deep space, with no star to return to. From that moment, everything changed. Because a planet without a star is not just far away. It is cut off from its only source of energy, no sunlight, no warmth, no day or night cycle, only darkness. Endless, complete darkness. But the most surprising part is this: these planets do not disappear. They continue to exist, moving silently through the void. And some of them may be more common than we think. Scientists estimate that there could be billions of rogue planets in our galaxy alone, perhaps even more than stars themselves. Which means the universe is not just filled with glowing systems and bright suns. It is also filled with darkness, with worlds that travel unseen. But what happens to a planet when it loses its star? At first, it still holds some of its original heat, energy trapped inside from its formation. But without a constant source of energy from a sun, that heat begins to fade. Slowly. Over time, the surface cools. Temperatures drop lower and lower, until eventually the planet becomes one of the coldest places in existence, colder than any environment we experience on Earth, colder than the outer edges of most planetary systems, a world locked in permanent night. But darkness is not the only change, because without sunlight, everything we associate with life begins to disappear. No photosynthesis, no visible light, no energy cycle driven by a star, which means that if life ever existed there, it would face extreme conditions, conditions that are difficult to imagine. And yet, some scientists believe that these worlds may not be completely dead, because even in darkness, a planet can still hold energy deep inside, residual heat from its core, or internal processes that continue long after the surface has frozen. This raises a question that feels almost impossible. Could something survive on a planet that has never seen the sun? Could there be hidden environments beneath the surface, protected from the cold, isolated from the darkness? We don't have a clear answer yet, but what we do know is this: rogue planets are not rare. They are part of the natural outcome of planetary formation. Systems form, planets interact, and sometimes they lose one of their own. That lost world does not disappear. It becomes something else, a wandering planet, a world without a home, a place where the rules are completely different. And when we begin to understand that, we realize something important. The universe is not just filled with light, it is also filled with darkness. Vast regions where stars do not shine, and within those regions, entire worlds exist, silent, frozen, and almost invisible, which means that the story of planets is not just about those that orbit stars, but also about those that were lost. And in the next part, we will go deeper into what happens to these worlds over time, and how they continue to evolve in complete darkness. Once a planet is cast out into deep space, its journey truly begins. Not a journey around a star, but a journey through darkness. A path with no destination, no orbit, no center, only motion. At first, the planet still carries the memory of its past. Heat trapped deep inside, energy left over from its formation. And for a time, that heat keeps parts of the planet active. The surface may still be warm enough to avoid complete freezing. The atmosphere, if it has one, may still remain intact. But this does not last forever, because without a star there is no external energy to replace what is lost, and slowly the planet begins to cool. The process is gradual, almost unnoticeable at first, but over millions of years the temperature continues to fall, lower and lower, until the surface becomes completely frozen. If there were oceans, they freeze, turning into thick layers of ice. If there were clouds, they disappear, leaving behind a silent, empty sky. And eventually, even the atmosphere begins to collapse. Gases condense. They fall back onto the surface, freezing into solid layers. What was once air becomes part of the ground. This is what happens on a planet without a sun. It loses everything that depends on heat, everything that requires energy. And what remains is a world of extremes: extreme cold, extreme darkness, extreme silence. But this is only the surface, because deep below, something may still remain. The core of the planet does not cool instantly. It holds heat for a very long time. Heat generated from its formation, and sometimes from radioactive processes inside the planet itself. This means that beneath the frozen surface, there may still be energy, still movement, still change. In some cases, this could create a hidden ocean, trapped beneath thick layers of ice, protected from the freezing conditions above. A dark ocean, sealed away from the rest of the universe. This idea may sound impossible, but we have already seen similar environments within our own solar system. Moons like Europa and Enceladus contain oceans beneath their icy surfaces, even though they receive very little sunlight. Now, imagine a rogue planet with the same structure, but completely isolated. No star, no light, only internal heat, and an ocean hidden in total darkness. This is where things become even more interesting, because if energy exists, even in small amounts, it opens the possibility for something else. Life. Not life as we know it on Earth, but something adapted to extreme conditions, something that does not depend on sunlight, something that exists in complete darkness, using chemical energy instead of light. We have already found similar forms of life deep in Earth's oceans, organisms that survive without sunlight, using heat from the planet's interior. So the question becomes, could the same thing happen on a rogue planet? A world drifting through space, with a hidden ocean beneath its frozen shell, and life existing in the dark? We don't know, but the possibility cannot be ignored. because the conditions may be there, and the universe is full of possibilities. But even if life does not exist, these planets remain fascinating, because they represent a completely different type of world, not defined by a star, not shaped by sunlight, but by isolation, by internal processes, by survival in darkness. And over time, they continue to drift, moving through the galaxy for billions of years, passing between stars, crossing vast distances without ever being seen, until one day they may encounter something new, another star, another system, another chance to become part of something larger again. And in the next part, we will explore what happens when a rogue planet approaches a new star, and whether it can ever find its place again in the light. For billions of years, a rogue planet drifts through complete darkness, no light, no direction, only motion, a silent journey through the vast emptiness of the galaxy. But space is not completely empty. Stars are everywhere, distant, scattered, but present. And over enough time, a wandering planet may pass close to one of them. This is where something extraordinary can happen, because even in the randomness of deep space, gravity still rules. If a rogue planet moves close enough to a star, the star's gravity can begin to pull it in. Slowly at first, then stronger, changing its path, bending its trajectory, and in rare cases, capturing it. This is how a lost world can find a new system, not by returning home, but by becoming part of something else, a second chance, a new orbit, a new beginning. But this process is not simple, because the conditions must be perfect. If the planet moves too fast, it will pass by and continue drifting. If it moves too close, the result could be violent. Extreme gravitational forces could tear at the planet, distorting its structure, or even breaking it apart. But if everything aligns just right, the planet can be captured, pulled into orbit around a new star. And when that happens, everything changes. Because for the first time in millions, or even billions of years, light returns. The frozen surface begins to warm, slowly, very slowly. Ice may begin to melt. Gases trapped in the surface could be released. An atmosphere might start to form again. The planet begins to transform from a frozen, dark world into something new. But this transformation is not guaranteed to be stable, because the planet is not the same as it was before. Its structure has changed. Its surface has been altered by extreme cold. Its internal energy has evolved over time. So when it enters a new system, it may behave in unexpected ways. It may not follow the same patterns as planets that formed there. Its orbit could be unstable. Its environment could be unpredictable. And in some cases, it may not remain in that system for long. It could be pulled in, only to be thrown out again, returning to the darkness. This is the reality of rogue planets. They are not fixed. They are not permanent members of any system. They are travelers, worlds that move between stars, sometimes alone, sometimes temporarily captured, but always at the mercy of gravity. This raises a deeper question. How many planets have followed this path? How many worlds have been ejected, captured, and ejected again? The answer is unknown. But it could be far more than we imagine, because planetary systems are not perfectly stable. They change over time. Interactions between planets can alter orbits. Gravitational forces can shift paths. And occasionally, a world is lost. But being lost does not mean being gone. It means becoming something else, a rogue planet, a wandering world that carries its history with it, even as it travels through space. And if it ever finds a new star, that history becomes part of its future, a past that shapes what it becomes next. This is what makes these planets so fascinating. They are not just objects, they are stories, stories that move through the galaxy, changing, adapting, and sometimes finding their way back into the light. And in the next part, we will go deeper into what these encounters really look like, and what happens when a rogue planet gets too close to something far more dangerous. As a rogue planet continues its journey, moving silently through deep space, there is always a possibility that it will encounter something far more dangerous than a star, something far more destructive. Because the galaxy is not empty. It is filled with objects that carry immense gravitational power. And if a wandering world moves too close to one of them, the outcome can be catastrophic. One of the most dangerous encounters is with a massive planet, a gas giant similar to Jupiter but in another system. If a rogue planet passes near such a body, the gravitational pull can become overwhelming. Instead of being gently captured, the planet may be violently redirected. Its path can change instantly, pulled into a chaotic trajectory that sends it spinning through space. In some cases, it may collide. A direct impact between two planetary bodies is one of the most powerful events in the universe. The energy released would be unimaginable. The surface would melt. The structure would collapse. The planet would not survive in its original form. It would become debris, fragments scattered across space. But even without a collision, gravity alone can be destructive. If the rogue planet passes too close, tidal forces begin to act. The side closest to the massive body feels a stronger pull. The far side feels less. This difference stretches the planet, deforms it. And if the forces are strong enough, they can tear it apart, breaking it into smaller pieces. This process is known as tidal disruption, and it can destroy a world without a direct impact. But there is something even more extreme, something far more powerful, a black hole, a region of space where gravity is so strong that nothing can escape, not even light. If a rogue planet approaches a black hole, its fate is sealed. At a distance, the planet may still appear intact. But as it gets closer, the gravitational difference between one side and the other becomes enormous. This creates a stretching effect. The planet begins to elongate, pulled apart into a long stream of material. This is often called spaghettification, a process where an object is stretched until it is completely destroyed, its structure no longer able to hold together. And once it crosses a certain point, there is no return. Everything that made the planet what it was is lost. But here's what makes this even more interesting. Not all encounters end in destruction. Some rogue planets may pass near dangerous objects and survive. Barely. Just like Tethys in its own story. Because survival in the universe is often about distance, about how close something gets to its limit. If the planet stays just far enough away, it may escape. Its path altered, its structure affected, but still intact. This idea connects everything together. Because whether it is internal pressure or external forces, the result depends on limits, how far a system is pushed, how close it gets to breaking, and whether it crosses that final boundary. Rogue planets live constantly near that uncertainty. They move through space without protection, without a stable orbit, always at risk of encountering something that could change everything or end it. And yet, many of them survive, continuing their journey through the galaxy, carrying their history with them until the next encounter, the next moment where everything could change again. And in the next part, we will explore just how far these worlds can travel and what their journey reveals about the scale of the universe itself. As a rogue planet continues its journey through the vast darkness of space, its story becomes less about where it came from and more about how far it can go. Because once a world is no longer bound to a star, there are no limits to its path, no orbit to follow, no predictable cycle, only motion through a galaxy so large that distances lose their meaning. Over millions and billions of years, this planet drifts between stars, passing through regions of space where light from distant suns appears faint and scattered, where entire systems exist far away, unreachable, and where silence dominates everything. What makes this journey so extraordinary is not just the distance, but the time, because a rogue planet does not travel for thousands or millions of years. It travels for billions, long enough to cross significant portions of the galaxy, long enough to witness changes that most worlds never experience. During this time, it may pass near other stars without being captured, its path bending slightly before continuing onward. Or it may move through dense regions where gravitational forces from multiple systems interact, creating complex trajectories that are impossible to predict with precision. In some cases, it might even pass through the outer edges of another planetary system, disturbing smaller bodies, altering orbits, and leaving behind subtle traces of its presence, before disappearing again into the dark. But most of the time, nothing dramatic happens, and that is what makes this existence so unique, because it is defined not by constant events, but by long periods of isolation, where the planet simply exists, carrying its internal structure, its frozen surface, and whatever heat remains deep within its core. Over such immense timescales, even that internal heat begins to fade, the planet cooling further and further until it reaches temperatures close to absolute zero, becoming one of the coldest objects in the universe. A world where motion slows, where materials behave differently, and where the surface becomes completely rigid. Yet even in this extreme state, the planet does not disappear. It continues to exist, continuing its journey, a silent traveler moving through an environment that offers no energy, no interaction, and no direction. This challenges our understanding of what it means for a planet to exist, because we often associate planets with stars, with light, with systems that define their behavior, but rogue planets exist outside of that structure, proving that a world can continue without any connection to a star, that it can persist in complete isolation for unimaginable lengths of time. And when we begin to consider how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes overwhelming, because if planetary systems frequently eject bodies during their formation and evolution, then rogue planets may be incredibly common, possibly numbering in the billions or even trillions within a single galaxy. This means that the universe is not just a collection of bright systems and visible structures, but also a vast network of unseen worlds drifting in darkness, each one carrying its own history, its own composition, and its own path through space. Some of them may have once been similar to Earth, others may have formed as gas giants, and some may have had conditions that briefly allowed for oceans or atmospheres before losing their connection to a star. But once they are cast out, all of them share the same fate, a journey without end, a path defined only by gravity and time. And perhaps the most fascinating part of this is that these worlds are not static. They are constantly moving, constantly interacting with the gravitational structure of the galaxy, responding to forces that guide them in subtle ways, shaping their trajectories over billions of years. This means that a rogue planet's journey is not entirely random. It is influenced by the mass distribution of the galaxy, by the presence of stars, by the movement of entire systems, creating paths that, while unpredictable in detail, are still part of a larger cosmic pattern. And within that pattern, there is always the possibility of change, the possibility that after billions of years of isolation, a rogue planet might once again encounter something significant, another star, another system, another moment where everything could shift, where it might be captured, destroyed, or continue its endless journey. This uncertainty is what defines these worlds, because they exist in a state where nothing is guaranteed, where every moment carries the potential for change, even if that change takes millions of years to occur. And when we look at this from a broader perspective, we begin to understand something profound about the universe itself, that it is not a fixed structure, but a dynamic system where objects are constantly moving, interacting, and evolving over timescales that far exceed human experience. Rogue planets are a perfect example of this, because they represent what happens when a world is removed from the stable environment of a planetary system and placed into the open galaxy, where it must exist on its own, relying only on its internal structure and the laws of physics that govern its motion. And despite everything, despite the extreme cold, the endless darkness, and the lack of energy, these worlds endure, continuing their journey through space, a reminder that existence in the universe does not require light, does not require a star, but only the ability to remain within the limits that prevent total destruction, even in the most extreme conditions imaginable. As a rogue planet continues its endless journey through the galaxy, the question is no longer just how far it can travel, but what it truly becomes over time. Because existence in complete darkness does not simply freeze a world in place, it slowly transforms it into something entirely different from the planets we are familiar with. Without the influence of a star, the surface remains locked in extreme cold, reaching temperatures so low that most materials become rigid and unchanging, turning the planet into a silent, frozen sphere drifting through space. But beneath that surface, the story can be very different, because even in the absence of sunlight, a planet can still hold energy deep within its core, energy that fades slowly over billions of years but never disappears instantly. This internal heat, left over from the planet's formation and sustained in part by radioactive elements, can create a hidden world beneath the ice, a region where temperatures are higher, where materials can still move, and where the conditions may be far more dynamic than the surface suggests. In some cases, this could lead to the existence of subsurface oceans, vast bodies of liquid trapped under kilometers of ice, completely isolated from the rest of the universe, existing in total darkness, but still capable of supporting chemical processes that depend not on light, but on heat and pressure. This idea is not just theoretical, because within our own solar system, moons like Europa and Enceladus have shown us that such environments can exist, even in places where sunlight is weak. And when we extend that concept to rogue planets, it becomes possible that these worlds may host similar hidden oceans, protected from the extreme cold of space by thick layers of ice. If that is the case, then a rogue planet is not entirely lifeless. It is simply divided into two very different regions: a frozen, inactive surface, exposed to the vacuum of space, and a hidden interior where conditions may still allow for movement, energy, and possibly even life. This changes the way we think about these worlds, because instead of being completely dead, they may be among the most isolated environments in the universe, places where any form of activity is completely cut off from external influence, evolving independently over immense periods of time. But even this internal activity has limits, because as time passes, the heat within the planet continues to dissipate, slowly reducing the energy available to sustain any dynamic processes, and eventually even the interior may begin to cool to the point where the movement becomes minimal, where oceans freeze completely, and where the entire planet reaches a state of near total stillness. This is the final stage of a rogue planet's evolution, a state where both surface and interior have lost most of their energy, leaving behind a world that is almost completely inactive, a relic of what it once was. And yet, even in this state, the planet does not cease to exist. It continues to drift, carrying with it the history of everything it has been through, from its formation in a distant system to its ejection into deep space, to its long journey through darkness, and its gradual transformation into a frozen, silent world. What makes this so remarkable is that this entire process happens without any external reference point, without day or night, without seasons, without any of the cycles that define planets like Earth, making the passage of time on a rogue planet fundamentally different, measured not in rotations or orbits, but in the slow cooling of its core and the gradual loss of its internal energy. This means that a rogue planet is, in many ways, one of the purest expressions of planetary evolution, a world that continues to exist based solely on its own internal properties and the fundamental laws of physics, without the influence of a star to shape its behavior. And when we consider how many of these worlds might exist, scattered throughout the galaxy, it becomes clear that they represent a significant part of the universe that we rarely observe, a hidden population of planets moving through space, each one following its own path, each one undergoing its own transformation over billions of years. Some may still hold heat, some may have frozen completely, some may have been captured by new stars, and others may have been destroyed by encounters with more massive objects, but all of them share a common origin, a moment where they were separated from their parent system and forced to continue alone. And this is what defines the existence of a rogue planet. Not just its isolation, but its independence, its ability to persist without the conditions we usually associate with planetary life, and its role as a reminder that the universe is far more complex and diverse than it appears when we focus only on the systems we can easily observe. In the end, a rogue planet is not just a lost world. It is a different kind of world, one that reveals how planets behave when all external influences are removed, and how they evolve when left alone with nothing but time, gravity, and the fading energy within their core. As we begin to understand rogue planets on a deeper level, it becomes clear that their story is not just about isolation, but about what happens when a world is completely removed from everything that normally defines it. Because without a star, without light, and without a stable system, a planet is forced into a state that is fundamentally different from anything we experience in our own solar system. Over billions of years, as it drifts through the galaxy, the rogue planet becomes a witness to a universe that is constantly in motion, passing by distant stars, moving through regions of space with varying gravitational influence, and occasionally encountering objects that alter its trajectory in subtle but meaningful ways. These interactions, even when they do not lead to capture or destruction, can still shape the path of the planet, creating a journey that is not entirely random, but influenced by the structure of the galaxy itself. This means that every rogue planet follows a unique path, a trajectory that may never repeat, and that can take it through vastly different environments over time, from relatively dense regions filled with stars to vast, empty voids where almost nothing exists. During this journey, the planet continues to evolve internally, even as its surface remains frozen and unchanging, because the slow loss of heat from its core is a process that unfolds over immense timescales, gradually reducing any remaining internal activity until the planet reaches a state of near total equilibrium. At this point, it becomes one of the most stable objects in the universe, not because it is protected by a system, but because it has lost almost all sources of change, existing in a state where very little can alter its structure. And yet, despite this apparent stability, the rogue planet is still part of a dynamic system on a larger scale, because the galaxy itself is constantly evolving, with stars moving, clusters forming and dispersing, and gravitational interaction shaping the motion of objects over billions of years. This means that even a planet drifting in deep space is not completely isolated from change, but rather influenced by forces that operate on scales far beyond its own structure. One of the most fascinating aspects of this is the possibility that some rogue planets may eventually encounter regions of space where star formation is occurring, vast clouds of gas and dust collapsing under gravity to form new stars and planetary systems. In such environments, the presence of a rogue planet could have unexpected consequences, potentially interacting with the forming system, altering the distribution of material, or even becoming part of the new system under the right conditions. This creates a cycle where planets are not just formed and remain in place, but can be ejected, travel through space, and then potentially become part of something new, contributing to the ongoing evolution of the galaxy. This idea challenges the traditional view of planetary systems as stable and isolated, showing instead that they are part of a larger, interconnected structure where objects can move between systems and influence each other over vast distances and timescales. And when we consider this, we begin to see rogue planets not as anomalies, but as an essential part of the universe's structure, a natural outcome of the processes that create and shape planetary systems. They represent the freedom of a world from its original environment, the ability to exist independently, and the potential to become something new under the right conditions. At the same time, they also represent the fragility of planetary systems, because their existence is a direct result of instability, of interactions that were strong enough to break the balance and send a world into deep space. This dual nature, both independent and a product of disruption, is what makes rogue planets so unique, because they embody both the stability of physical laws and the unpredictability of complex systems. And as we continue to study them, we gain insight not only into their individual properties, but into the larger processes that govern the universe, from the formation of stars and planets to the interactions that shape their evolution over billions of years. In the end, a rogue planet is more than just a world without a sun. It is a traveler, a participant in the ongoing evolution of the galaxy, moving through space with a history that connects it to the system it left behind, and a future that may lead it to something entirely new. As the journey of a rogue planet continues across unimaginable distances, it begins to reveal something deeper about the nature of the universe itself, something that goes far beyond a single world drifting in darkness, because what we are really observing is not just isolation, but the existence of objects that operate completely outside the systems we usually depend on to understand reality. A rogue planet does not experience days or nights. It does not orbit a star, and it does not follow the familiar cycles that define most worlds, which means its entire existence is shaped only by internal processes and the subtle gravitational influence of the galaxy around it. Over billions of years, this creates a state that is both stable and fragile at the same time. Stable because there are few external forces acting directly on the planet, but fragile because any significant encounter could instantly change its path or even destroy it. This dual nature is what makes rogue planets so fascinating, because they exist in a balance that is completely different from that of planets bound to stars, a balance where long periods of calm can be interrupted by rare but potentially catastrophic events. During its journey, a rogue planet may pass through regions of space where gravitational forces from nearby stars slightly alter its trajectory, slowly changing its path in ways that are almost impossible to predict. And over enough time, these small changes can accumulate, leading the planet into entirely new regions of the galaxy. In some cases, this could bring it close to another planetary system, creating the possibility of interaction, capture, or even disruption. But most of the time, the planet continues on its path, moving through the vast emptiness with no direct contact with other objects. What makes this even more remarkable is the scale of time involved, because the processes that shape the journey of a rogue planet occur over millions and billions of years, far beyond human experience, meaning that what appears static to us is actually part of a slow and continuous evolution. Even the internal structure of the planet is not completely frozen in time, because while the surface may be locked in extreme cold, the gradual cooling of the core continues to change the internal state, reducing any remaining activity until the planet reaches a point where almost nothing inside can move. At this stage, the rogue planet becomes one of the most stable objects in existence, not because it is protected or supported by a system, but because it has reached a state where change is minimal, a kind of thermal equilibrium, where the absence of energy prevents further evolution. And yet, even in this state, the planet is still part of the larger structure of the universe, still influenced by gravity, still moving through space, still capable of interacting with other objects under the right conditions. This highlights an important idea, that nothing in the universe is truly isolated. Even objects that appear completely alone are still connected to the larger system through the fundamental forces that govern motion and interaction. Rogue planets are a perfect example of this, because their existence depends on the same physical laws that shape stars and galaxies, even though they operate in a very different environment. When we consider how many of these worlds might exist, the picture becomes even more complex, because if rogue planets are as common as current estimates suggest, then the galaxy is filled with unseen objects moving through space, each one following its own path, each one carrying a history that we can only begin to imagine. Some of these planets may have once been part of stable systems, others may have formed in isolation, and some may have experienced multiple interactions that shaped their current state. But all of them share the same fundamental characteristic. They exist without a star, without a fixed position, and without the conditions we usually associate with planetary life. This forces us to expand our understanding of what a planet can be, because it shows that the definition of a world is not limited to those that orbit stars, but includes a much broader range of objects that exist in different states and environments. And when we look at it this way, the universe becomes far more diverse and complex than it appears at first glance, filled not only with bright systems and visible structures, but also with hidden worlds that move through darkness, shaping and being shaped by the same forces that govern everything else. In the end, the story of a rogue planet is not just about isolation, but about the ability of a world to exist under completely different conditions, to evolve without external energy, and to remain part of the universe, even when it is separated from everything we normally associate with planetary existence. As we follow the path of a rogue planet deeper into the unknown, we begin to understand that its existence is not just a scientific curiosity, but a reflection of something far more fundamental about the universe, because a world that drifts without a star reveals how fragile and temporary all planetary systems truly are. Every planet that orbits a star today does so because a delicate balance of gravitational forces has been maintained, but that balance is never guaranteed, and under the right conditions, it can be broken. When that happens, a planet can be ejected, removed from its system, and sent into deep space, becoming one of these silent travelers. This means that rogue planets are not rare accidents, but natural outcomes of dynamic systems, evidence that planetary formation and evolution are far more chaotic than they appear when we observe stable systems like our own. Over billions of years, these wandering worlds move through the galaxy, carrying with them the history of their origin, even as their surfaces freeze and their internal energy slowly fades. What makes this even more fascinating is the idea that these planets may pass through regions of space that are completely different from where they formed, encountering environments with different densities, gravitational influences, and levels of radiation, each one subtly shaping their journey. In some cases, a rogue planet may pass close enough to a star to experience a temporary increase in temperature, causing surface changes or releasing gases trapped in the ice, only to drift away again and return to darkness. In other cases, it may pass through a region filled with interstellar gas and dust, interacting with that material in ways that are still not fully understood, potentially altering its surface or adding new layers over time. These interactions, while rare, show that even in isolation, a rogue planet is not completely static, but part of a larger system where motion and interaction continue on scales that are difficult to comprehend. Another important aspect of these worlds is their potential role in transporting material across the galaxy, because as they move from one region to another, they may carry elements, compounds, or even complex molecules that originated in one system and are delivered to another. This raises intriguing possibilities about the movement of matter in the universe and the ways in which different systems may be connected, not directly, but through these wandering objects that bridge vast distances over immense periods of time. While the idea of life on rogue planets remains uncertain, the possibility of subsurface environments means that these worlds cannot be dismissed as completely inactive, because even in total darkness, the presence of internal heat and chemical energy could create conditions that allow for processes similar to those found in extreme environments on Earth. This suggests that the definition of habitable environments may need to be expanded, not limited to planets within a certain distance from a star, but including worlds that exist in entirely different conditions, relying on internal energy rather than external light. When we consider this, the universe becomes a much more complex and interconnected place where life and activity may exist in forms and locations we have only begun to imagine. At the same time, the existence of rogue planets reminds us that stability is not permanent, that systems can change, and that even something as large as a planet can be displaced and forced to survive under completely different conditions. This idea challenges the way we think about permanence and structure, showing that everything in the universe is subject to change, and that what we observe at any given moment is only a snapshot of a much longer process. Rogue planets are living examples of that process, objects that have experienced a dramatic transition from being part of a system to existing independently, and that continue to evolve as they move through the galaxy. Their journey is not defined by a destination, but by the path itself, a path shaped by gravity, time, and the fundamental laws that govern motion in the universe. And as we continue to study these worlds, we gain a deeper understanding not only of their nature, but of the broader processes that shape galaxies, influence planetary systems, and determine the fate of worlds across cosmic timescales. In the end, a rogue planet is not just a lost object, it is a testament to the dynamic nature of the universe, a reminder that even the largest structures are not fixed, and that everything, from the smallest particle to entire planetary systems, exists within a constantly changing environment where stability is always temporary, and the potential for transformation is always present. As we reach the final stage of this journey, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun begins to feel less like a distant concept and more like a fundamental truth about the universe, because what rogue planets reveal is not just a different kind of world, but a different way for existence itself to unfold. A planet does not need a star to exist. It does not need light to continue, and it does not need to be part of a system to remain a world. It only needs to stay within the limits that allow its structure to hold together. This realization changes everything, because it shows that what we consider normal, planets orbiting stars, experiencing light, warmth, and cycles, is only one possible outcome among many. There are other paths, other conditions, other ways for a world to exist. And rogue planets are the clearest example of that diversity. They are the result of instability, of systems that changed, of forces that broke the balance and sent a world into the unknown, but they are also the result of resilience, of a structure that remained intact despite losing everything that once defined it. Over billions of years, these planets continue their journey, cooling, evolving, and adapting to an environment where almost nothing happens, yet where everything that matters still exists in a different form. The surface becomes frozen and silent, the atmosphere collapses or disappears, and the internal heat slowly fades, but the planet itself remains, moving through space, part of the galaxy, influenced by gravity, shaped by time. And this is where the deeper meaning emerges, because rogue planets are not just objects drifting in darkness. They are evidence that the universe is far more flexible than we imagine, that it allows for existence in conditions that seem impossible, and that it is not defined by a single type of structure or system. When we think about how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes almost overwhelming, because if they are as common as current theories suggest, then the galaxy is filled with unseen planets, each one following its own path, each one carrying its own history, and each one representing a different outcome of the same fundamental processes. Some may have once been similar to Earth, others may have formed as gas giants, and some may have been captured or ejected multiple times, their paths shaped by countless interactions over billions of years. This means that the universe is not just a collection of stable systems, but a constantly changing network of objects moving, interacting, and evolving in ways that are difficult to fully understand. Rogue planets are part of that network, a hidden population that challenges our perception of what a planet is and how it behaves. And perhaps the most profound aspect of all of this is the idea that these worlds exist without ever being seen, without reflecting light from a nearby star, without announcing their presence, moving silently through space, almost invisible unless we know exactly where to look. This makes them some of the most elusive objects in the universe, and yet they may be among the most numerous. In the end, the story of a planet that never sees the sun is not just about darkness. It is about independence, about survival in the absence of everything we normally associate with planetary existence, and about the ability of a world to continue, even when it has lost its place in the system that created it. It is a reminder that the universe is not limited to what we can easily observe, but extends far beyond it, filled with worlds that exist under entirely different conditions, each one following its own path through space and time. And when we understand that, we begin to see the universe not as a fixed structure, but as a dynamic and evolving system, where every object, whether bound to a star or drifting alone in the dark, plays a role in the larger story of cosmic evolution. A story that continues to unfold across billions of years, far beyond anything we can fully comprehend. As we go even further into this idea, the existence of a planet that never sees the sun begins to reveal something deeper about reality itself, because what we are truly looking at is not just a different kind of environment, but a different expression of what it means for something to exist in the universe. A rogue planet removes everything we usually depend on to understand a world. No light, no orbit, no system, no constant source of energy, and yet, despite all of that, it continues. It remains a planet, it keeps its structure, it follows the same physical laws as any other world, but it does so in complete isolation, proving that existence is not dependent on conditions that seem essential to us. This forces us to rethink the role of stars in the life of a planet, because while they provide energy and create environments where life as we know it can develop, they are not required for a planet to persist. A rogue planet shows that a world can survive the loss of its star, that it can continue moving through space for billions of years, carrying with it whatever remains of its original structure, even as its surface freezes and its internal processes slow down. Over these immense timescales, the planet becomes something that is almost impossible to relate to, a world without change in the way we understand it, a place where there are no cycles, no seasons, no day or night, only a slow and gradual evolution driven by the fading of internal energy and the influence of gravity on a galactic scale. And yet, even in this extreme state, the planet is not completely disconnected from the rest of the universe, because it still interacts with the gravitational field of the galaxy, still responds to the movement of stars and clusters, and still follows a path that is shaped by forces far larger than itself. This highlights an important idea, that nothing in the universe is truly isolated. Even the most distant and seemingly disconnected objects are part of a larger system, influenced by the same fundamental laws that govern everything else. Rogue planets are a perfect example of this, because they exist at the edge of what we can observe and understand. Yet they are still part of the same cosmic structure that includes stars, galaxies, and everything in between. When we consider how many of these worlds might exist, the implications become even more significant, because if they are as common as current models suggest, then the majority of planets in the galaxy may not be orbiting stars at all, but drifting freely through space, hidden from view. forming a vast population of unseen worlds. This challenges our perception of the universe because it suggests that what we observe directly, the bright stars and their planets, may only represent a small fraction of what actually exists. The rest is hidden in darkness, moving silently through space, following paths that may never intersect with anything else. And within that hidden population, there may be worlds with a wide range of properties, some still retaining internal heat, some completely frozen, some with thick layers of ice protecting subsurface oceans, and others that have evolved into stable, inactive objects with no remaining internal activity. Each of these worlds represents a different outcome of the same fundamental processes, showing that planetary evolution is not a single path, but a range of possibilities shaped by initial conditions, interactions, and time. This diversity is what makes rogue planets so important to study, because they expand our understanding of what a planet can be and how it can evolve under conditions that are very different from those we are familiar with. And as we continue to explore this concept, we begin to see that a planet that never sees the sun is not just an extreme case, but a natural part of the universe, a reminder that existence is not limited to environments with light and energy, but can continue even in complete darkness, driven only by the fundamental properties of matter and the laws that govern it. In the end, rogue planets show us that the universe is not defined by a single type of structure or condition, but by a wide range of possibilities, each one representing a different way for matter to organize itself and persist over time, even in the most unlikely and extreme environments imaginable. In the end, when everything is stripped away, when light is gone, when warmth no longer exists, and when a world is left completely alone in the vast darkness of space, what remains is something far more powerful than we expect. A rogue planet is not just a lost object, drifting without purpose. It is proof that existence itself does not depend on light, on stars, or on being part of something larger, but on the ability of a structure to hold together within the limits set by the universe. Tethys showed us how close a world can come to breaking apart and still survive. And rogue planets take that idea even further, showing us what happens when a world loses everything that once defined it and continues anyway. These planets carry their past with them, the memory of the system they once belonged to, the forces that shaped them, and the moment when everything changed, when they were pushed beyond stability and forced into a new path through deep space. Over billions of years, they evolve, not through cycles of light and darkness, but through the slow fading of internal energy, through the quiet influence of gravity, and through rare encounters that can alter their journey in an instant. Some may pass near stars and briefly return to light before disappearing again into the void. Others may travel for their entire existence without ever coming close to anything significant, and some may eventually be captured, becoming part of a new system and beginning a completely different chapter in their existence. But no matter what happens, their story is defined by independence, by the ability to persist without the conditions we normally associate with life and activity. And this is what makes them so important, because they reveal a side of the universe that is almost invisible, a vast population of worlds that exist in darkness, shaping and being shaped by the same forces that govern everything else, yet doing so in a way that is completely different from the planets we are familiar with. When we consider this, the universe becomes much larger and more complex than it first appears, not just a collection of bright stars and visible systems, but a dynamic and evolving structure filled with objects that move, change, and persist under a wide range of conditions. Rogue planets remind us that stability is not permanent, that systems can break apart, and that even when they do, the pieces do not simply disappear. They continue, they adapt, and they become something new. They show us that darkness is not the end, but another state of existence, one where the rules are different, but where the same fundamental principles still apply. And when we look out into the night sky at the stars that seem so distant and so permanent, we can now imagine the countless unseen worlds moving between them, silent travelers crossing the galaxy, carrying with them the history of where they came from and the possibility of what they might become. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a mystery. It is a reminder that the universe is not defined by light, but by balance, by the ability of matter to exist under any condition, and by the idea that even in the deepest darkness, something can still remain, still move, and still be part of the endless story of the cosmos. As we reach the final depth of this story, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun transforms from something distant and abstract into something deeply meaningful. Because what rogue planets truly represent is not just isolation, but freedom from everything we once believed was necessary for a world to exist. These planets move through the galaxy without light, without a system, and without a fixed path, yet they continue, guided only by gravity and time, existing in a state that challenges everything we associate with planetary life and stability. Over billions of years, a rogue planet becomes a silent witness to the evolution of the galaxy itself, passing through regions of space where stars are born, and others where stars have already died, crossing immense distances that connect different parts of the universe in ways we are only beginning to understand. What makes this journey even more extraordinary is that it happens without any awareness, without any change in direction driven by choice, but purely through the natural laws that govern motion, creating a path that is both random and structured at the same time. During this journey, the planet carries with it the memory of its origin, the materials that formed it, and the changes it experienced, even as its surface remains frozen and its internal energy slowly fades. And yet, despite losing everything that once defined it, the planet does not cease to be. It remains a coherent structure, a world in its own right, proving that existence is not tied to conditions like light or warmth, but to the ability of matter to hold together under the forces that shape it. This realization opens up an entirely new perspective on the universe, one where planets are not just defined by their relationship to stars, but by their own internal properties and their place within the larger cosmic structure. It suggests that the universe is filled with a diversity of worlds far greater than what we can observe directly, including countless rogue planets moving through darkness, each one representing a different outcome of planetary formation and evolution. Some of these worlds may eventually encounter new systems and become part of them. Others may continue drifting forever, never interacting with anything significant again, and some may be destroyed by encounters with massive objects, their material becoming part of something else. This cycle of formation, interaction, and transformation is what defines the universe on the largest scales, showing that nothing is truly permanent, that even planets can be displaced, reshaped, or destroyed over time. And within this dynamic system, rogue planets play a crucial role, acting as carriers of material and energy across vast distances, connecting different regions of the galaxy in subtle but important ways. When we consider this, we begin to see that the story of a planet that never sees the sun is not just about darkness, but about continuity, about the ability of matter to persist and evolve even in the absence of the conditions we usually consider essential. It is a story about resilience, about the ways in which structures can adapt to extreme environments, and about the fundamental nature of the universe as a place where existence takes many forms, not all of which are visible or easy to understand. In the end, a rogue planet is not just a lonely world drifting through space. It is part of a much larger system, a participant in the ongoing evolution of the galaxy, and a reminder that the universe is far more complex and diverse than it appears when we look only at the light. As we reach even deeper into this concept, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun begins to reshape how we understand the universe itself, because what rogue planets reveal is not just isolation, but the hidden structure of a cosmos that extends far beyond what we can see. We tend to focus on stars because they are bright, because they define systems, and because they allow us to observe planets through the light they reflect. But in reality, the majority of worlds may exist outside of that visibility, drifting in darkness, unlit and almost impossible to detect. This means that the universe we observe is only a fraction of what actually exists, a small window into a much larger and more complex system, filled with unseen objects, moving silently through space. Rogue planets are part of that hidden population, and their existence suggests that planetary systems are not isolated and permanent, but dynamic and constantly evolving, capable of losing members and interacting with the wider galaxy in ways that are not immediately obvious. Over billions of years, these wandering worlds move through different regions of space, influenced by the gravitational structure of the galaxy, passing near stars, avoiding some encounters, and experiencing others that may alter their path forever. This creates a kind of cosmic migration, where planets are not fixed in place, but can travel across vast distances, potentially carrying material from one region to another, contributing to the overall distribution of matter in the galaxy. And within this process, there is always the possibility of transformation, because a rogue planet is not locked into a single fate. It can remain isolated, be captured by a new star, or be destroyed by a powerful encounter, each outcome representing a different path in the life of a world. What makes this even more fascinating is the idea that some rogue planets may have once had conditions similar to Earth, with atmospheres, oceans, and perhaps even the potential for life, only to lose all of that when they were ejected into deep space, becoming frozen remnants of what they once were. This raises profound questions about how many worlds in the universe have undergone similar transformations, how many have lost their stars, and how many continue to exist in darkness, carrying the remnants of their past within them. It also challenges our understanding of habitability, because if subsurface environments can exist on these planets, protected from the extreme cold by thick layers of ice, then the potential for life may not be limited to planets within a narrow zone around a star, but could extend to worlds that exist in completely different conditions. This idea expands the boundaries of where life might be found, suggesting that the universe may host forms of activity and complexity in places we have only begun to consider. At the same time, the existence of rogue planets reminds us that stability is always temporary, that the systems we observe today may not remain unchanged, and that even a planet as large as Earth could, under the right conditions, be ejected from its orbit and sent into deep space. While such an event is extremely unlikely in our current system, it is not impossible in a broader cosmic context, and this realization highlights the delicate balance that allows planetary systems to remain stable over long periods of time. Rogue planets are the result of that balance being broken, and they serve as evidence of the dynamic nature of the universe, where change is constant and outcomes are never guaranteed. In the end, the story of a planet that never sees the sun is not just about darkness, but about the hidden complexity of the cosmos, about the vast number of worlds that exist beyond our direct observation, and about the processes that shape their existence over billions of years. It is a reminder that the universe is far larger, more diverse, and more unpredictable than it appears, and that even in the deepest darkness, there are worlds that continue to move, evolve, and remain part of the endless story of cosmic evolution. As we come closer to the true depth of this idea, the existence of a planet that never sees the sun begins to feel less like an exception and more like a fundamental part of how the universe works, because what rogue planets reveal is not just isolation, but the reality that systems are temporary and that even the most stable structures can change over time. Every planetary system we observe today is the result of a balance that has been maintained, but that balance is never permanent. It is always subject to disruption, to interaction, and to forces that can alter or break it entirely. Rogue planets are the direct evidence of that process, worlds that once belonged to a system, that once followed an orbit and that once experienced light, only to be removed and forced into a completely different state of existence. What makes this transformation so profound is that it does not destroy the planet, it changes it, turning it into something that can persist under entirely different conditions. Over billions of years, the rogue planet becomes a silent traveler, moving through the galaxy without a fixed destination, shaped only by gravity and the slow passage of time. Its surface freezes, its atmosphere collapses or disappears, and its internal heat gradually fades, yet it continues, existing as a stable structure even in the absence of the conditions we usually associate with planetary life. This challenges the way we think about what a planet is, because it shows that a world does not need to be part of a system to exist. It only needs to remain within the physical limits that prevent it from breaking apart. And this idea extends far beyond individual planets, because it reflects a universal principle that everything in the cosmos exists within certain limits, and that crossing those limits leads to transformation or destruction. Rogue planets exist because they remained within those limits, even as their environment changed completely, and this makes them a powerful example of how structures can adapt and persist in extreme conditions. When we consider the scale of the galaxy, the number of these worlds becomes almost unimaginable, because if planetary systems frequently eject bodies during their evolution, then rogue planets may be among the most common types of planetary objects, far more numerous than those bound to stars. This means that the universe is not just filled with visible systems, but also with a vast hidden population of worlds moving through darkness, each one following its own path, each one representing a different outcome of the same fundamental processes. Some of these planets may eventually be captured by new stars, becoming part of new systems and beginning a new phase of their existence, while others may continue drifting for the entire lifetime of the galaxy, never interacting with anything significant again. And, in some cases, they may encounter objects powerful enough to destroy them, ending their journey and transforming them into debris that becomes part of something else. This constant cycle of formation, interaction, and transformation is what defines the universe on the largest scales, showing that nothing is truly permanent, and that even the most massive objects are subject to change over time. Rogue planets are a key part of that cycle, acting as both remnants of past systems and potential contributors to future ones, linking different regions of the galaxy through their movement and interactions. And when we look at them from this perspective, they are no longer just isolated worlds, but active participants in the ongoing evolution of the cosmos, carrying with them the history of where they came from and the potential to influence what comes next. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a symbol of darkness, but a representation of continuity, of the ability of matter to persist and adapt even when removed from the environment that created it, and of the dynamic nature of the universe, where every object, no matter how isolated, remains part of a larger story that continues to unfold across billions of years. As we reach the deepest point of this journey, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun becomes more than just a scientific concept. It becomes a way of understanding the universe on a completely different level, because what rogue planets truly reveal is that existence itself is not tied to light, to warmth, or to belonging, but to balance, structure, and the ability to persist within limits. A rogue planet is a world that has lost everything that once defined it, its star, its orbit, its place within a system, and yet it continues, moving through the galaxy as a complete and stable object, guided only by gravity and the slow passage of time. Over billions of years, it evolves in silence, its surface frozen into stillness, its internal heat fading gradually, and its interactions with the outside world reduced to rare and distant encounters that may slightly alter its path, but rarely define it. This creates a form of existence that is almost pure, stripped of all external influences, where the only processes that matter are those that originate from within, or from the fundamental forces that govern motion in the universe. And in that state, the rogue planet becomes something remarkable, not because of what it does, but because of what it proves, that a world does not need to be part of a system to remain a world, that it does not need light to exist, and that it can persist in complete isolation for timescales that are almost impossible to comprehend. This challenges one of our most basic assumptions about the universe, that everything is defined by its connection to something else, because rogue planets show us that there are objects that exist independently, maintaining their structure and identity, even when separated from everything that once gave them context. At the same time, they remind us that this independence comes at a cost, because without a star, without energy, and without interaction, the planet slowly loses its ability to change, becoming more and more static as its internal processes fade, until it reaches a state where almost nothing happens at all. In that sense, a rogue planet represents both survival and stillness, a world that continues to exist, but does so in a way that is fundamentally different from the dynamic environments we are familiar with. And yet, even in this state, it is not completely disconnected from the universe, because it still moves, still follows a path shaped by gravity, and still has the potential to encounter something that could change everything: a star, a massive object, or another system that might capture it or destroy it. This means that its story is never truly finished, even after billions of years, because as long as it exists, there's always the possibility of transformation, always the chance that it could become part of something new, or be reshaped by forces beyond its control. This balance between stability and uncertainty is what defines the existence of rogue planets, and it reflects a broader truth about the universe itself, that everything exists within a range of conditions where it can persist, but that those conditions are never guaranteed, always subject to change, and always capable of producing different outcomes. Rogue planets are a perfect example of this principle, because they show us what happens when a world is pushed beyond the limits of a system, but remains within the limits of existence, continuing on a path that is entirely its own. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a world in darkness. It is a symbol of what the universe truly is, a place where existence is defined not by light or connection, but by the ability of matter to remain within the boundaries that allow it to hold together, even in the most extreme and isolated conditions imaginable. At this stage, when everything has been explored and every layer of the story has been revealed, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun begins to feel less like a mystery and more like a quiet truth about the universe, a truth that exists beyond light, beyond stars, and beyond the systems we use to understand everything around us. Because what rogue planets ultimately show us is that existence does not require a center. It does not require stability in the way we imagine it, and it does not depend on being part of something larger to have meaning or structure. A rogue planet is a world that has been removed from its origin, separated from the forces that once defined its path, and placed into an environment where almost nothing changes, and yet it continues, it remains. and it follows its own trajectory through the galaxy, shaped only by gravity and time. Over billions of years, this journey becomes something almost philosophical, a movement through space that is not guided by purpose, but by the natural laws that govern motion, a path that connects distant regions of the galaxy without ever belonging to any of them. This creates a form of existence that is both isolated and connected at the same time. Isolated because the planet no longer interacts with the system in any meaningful way, but connected because it is still part of the larger structure of the galaxy, influenced by its mass, its motion, and its gravitational field. And this dual nature is what makes rogue planets so powerful as a concept, because they exist at the edge of what we can observe and understand, showing us that the universe is not just a collection of stable systems, but a dynamic network of objects that move, change, and persist under a wide range of conditions. When we think about how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes almost impossible to grasp, because if planetary systems frequently eject bodies during their evolution, then the number of rogue planets could rival or even exceed the number of stars, meaning that for every system we see, there may be multiple worlds drifting in darkness, unseen and largely undetected. This shifts our perspective entirely, because it suggests that the visible universe is only a small part of the full picture, and that most of what exists is hidden, moving silently through space without reflecting light or drawing attention, and within that hidden population, there may be an incredible diversity of worlds, some still holding internal heat, some completely frozen, some with thick layers of ice protecting subsurface environments, and others that have reached a state of near total stillness, each one representing a different stage in the long process of planetary evolution. This diversity shows us that there is no single path for a planet, no single outcome that defines what a world must become, but rather a range of possibilities shaped by initial conditions, interactions, and time. Rogue planets are the result of one of those paths, a path where a world is removed from its system and forced to exist independently, adapting to conditions that are completely different from those it was originally formed in. And in doing so, they reveal something fundamental about the universe, that it is not defined by a single type of structure or condition, but by a wide range of possibilities, each one valid, each one capable of persisting under the right circumstances. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just an object drifting in darkness. It is a reflection of the universe's ability to create, transform, and sustain structures under even the most extreme conditions, a reminder that existence is not limited to what we can easily observe, but extends far beyond it, into regions of space where light does not reach, but where worlds continue to move, to evolve, and to remain part of the endless and ever-changing story of the cosmos. As we reach the final depth of this journey, the idea of a planet that never sees the sun becomes something more than a concept. It becomes a reflection of the true nature of the universe, a place where existence is not defined by light, by warmth, or by belonging, but by the ability of matter to persist under the most extreme and unlikely conditions. A rogue planet is a world that has lost everything that once gave it context, its star, its orbit, its place in a system, and yet it continues to exist, moving through the galaxy in complete darkness, guided only by gravity and the passage of time. Over billions of years, it becomes a silent witness to the evolution of the cosmos, passing through regions where stars are born, and others where stars have faded, crossing distances so vast that they connect different parts of the galaxy in ways we can barely imagine. And throughout this journey, it remains unchanged in the ways that matter most, its structure intact, its path defined, its existence continuing even in the absence of everything we once believed was necessary. This challenges one of our most basic assumptions, that life, motion, and existence require energy from a star, because rogue planets show us that while such energy shapes certain environments, it is not required for a world to endure. Instead, endurance comes from balance, from remaining within the limits that prevent collapse, and from the fundamental laws that govern how matter behaves under gravity and pressure. When we consider how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes overwhelming, because if they are as common as current theories suggest, then the galaxy is filled with unseen planets, each one following its own path, each one representing a different outcome of the same processes that formed the planets we know. Some may remain in darkness forever, never encountering another star. Others may briefly return to light before drifting away again, and some may be destroyed by encounters with more powerful objects, their material becoming part of something new. This constant cycle of movement and transformation is what defines the universe, a system where nothing is truly fixed, where even planets can be displaced, reshaped, or lost, yet where the total structure continues to evolve. Rogue planets are a crucial part of that process, acting as both remnants of past systems and potential contributors to future ones, carrying with them the materials and histories of the places they came from. And in this way, they are not just isolated objects, but participants in the larger story of cosmic evolution, linking different regions of the galaxy across vast spans of time and space. When we look at them from this perspective, we begin to understand that the universe is not divided between light and darkness, but unified by the same principles that allow objects to exist in both, whether illuminated by a star or hidden in the void. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a symbol of isolation. It is a symbol of continuity, of the ability of the universe to sustain structures even when they are removed from everything that once defined them, and of the idea that existence itself is far more resilient and adaptable than we ever imagined. As we move beyond everything we've uncovered, the story of a planet that never sees the sun begins to settle into something deeper, something quieter, a realization that what we are truly observing is not just a different kind of world, but a different kind of existence. A rogue planet does not live within cycles. It does not rise or set. It does not experience change in the ways we understand. And yet, it remains part of the same universe that created stars, galaxies, and everything in between. It drifts through the darkness, not lost, but simply following a path that no longer depends on anything external, a path shaped only by gravity and the vast structure of the galaxy itself. Over unimaginable spans of time, it becomes almost timeless, its surface frozen, its internal energy nearly gone, its presence marked only by its motion through space. A silent traveler crossing distances so large that even light takes thousands of years to pass between them. And in that silence, there is something almost absolute, a form of stillness that does not exist anywhere else, because even the most distant stars still burn, still change, still emit energy, but a rogue planet, at its final stage, becomes something else entirely, a world where change has slowed to almost nothing, where time itself feels stretched beyond meaning. And yet, even in that state, it is not separate from the universe because it still responds to gravity, still follows a trajectory, still exists within the same framework that governs everything else. This is what makes it so powerful as an idea, because it shows that existence does not require activity, it does not require light, and it does not require connection in the way we usually define it. It only requires that the structure remains within the limits that allow it to hold together. Rogue planets are the purest expression of that principle. Worlds that have been stripped of everything but their core existence, reduced to their most fundamental form, and still able to persist across billions of years. When we think about how many of these worlds might exist, the universe begins to feel very different. Not just a place filled with light and energy, but one dominated by darkness, by unseen objects moving through space, each one following its own path, each one carrying a story that we may never fully uncover. This hidden population suggests that the majority of planetary bodies in the galaxy may never be seen directly, that they exist beyond our current ability to observe, and that what we understand about planets is only a small part of a much larger reality. And within that reality, rogue planets are not anomalies, they are a natural outcome, a necessary part of how systems form, evolve, and change over time. Some will remain in darkness forever, others may eventually encounter new systems, and some may be destroyed, their material becoming part of something else, but all of them contribute to the ongoing evolution of the galaxy. In this way, a rogue planet is not just a remnant of a past system, but a participant in the future, carrying matter, influencing gravitational interactions, and existing as part of the larger structure that continues to evolve over billions of years. And as we look at the universe with this understanding, we begin to see that nothing is truly fixed, that everything is part of a process, and that even the most stable objects are only temporary states within that process. A planet that never sees the sun is not the end of a story, it is simply another form that the story can take, a reminder that existence in the universe is not limited to what we can see or easily understand, but extends far beyond it, into the darkness where worlds continue to move, to persist, and to remain part of the endless and ever-changing cosmos. And now, as we reach the absolute end of this journey, everything becomes quiet again, just as it was at the beginning, a vast darkness stretching across space, where a single world continues to drift, unseen, untouched, and almost forgotten. A planet that never sees the sun does not announce its existence. It does not reflect light. It does not reveal itself easily. Yet it remains there, moving through the galaxy as it has for billions of years, following a path that has no clear beginning and no defined end. What we have discovered is not just the story of a lost world, but the story of what happens when a planet is stripped down to its most fundamental state, when everything that once defined it is removed, and what remains is only structure, motion, and the quiet persistence of existence itself. This kind of world forces us to rethink everything, because it shows us that the universe is not built only around light and energy, but also around absence, around silence, and around conditions where almost nothing happens, yet where existence continues anyway. Rogue planets are the purest example of this idea. Worlds that have crossed beyond the boundaries of systems, beyond the reach of stars, and into a state where they exist completely on their own, guided only by the laws that govern matter and motion. Over unimaginable periods of time, they move through the galaxy, passing by distant stars that they will never orbit, crossing regions of space that may never affect them, and continuing forward without purpose, yet never stopping. And in that endless motion, there is something profound, something that reflects the true nature of the universe, a place where everything is in constant movement, where nothing is truly fixed, and where even isolation is part of a larger system. Because even a planet drifting alone is still connected to the galaxy, still influenced by its gravity, still part of its structure, even if that connection is invisible. This is what makes the story complete. The realization that nothing in the universe truly exists in isolation, that even in the deepest darkness, there is still a connection to something larger, something that shapes motion, defines paths, and ensures that everything remains part of a greater whole. And yet, at the same time, rogue planets remind us of how fragile that connection can be, how easily a world can be separated from its origin, and how different existence can become once that separation occurs. They show us that stability is temporary, that systems can break, and that when they do, the pieces do not simply disappear. They continue, they adapt, and they become something new. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a symbol of darkness. It is a symbol of resilience, of the ability to persist even when everything familiar is gone, and of the idea that existence itself is not dependent on conditions, but on balance, on structure, and on the fundamental laws that govern the universe. As we step back from this journey, the image that remains is simple: a single world drifting through endless space, silent, frozen, and alone, yet still there, still moving, still existing, a reminder that even in the absence of light, even in the deepest void, the universe continues, and within it, so do the worlds that we may never see, but that are always there, part of the infinite and ever-changing story of the cosmos. And even after everything has been said, after every layer of this journey has been uncovered, there is still one final perspective to consider, one that goes beyond science, beyond structure, and into the way we understand existence itself, because a planet that never sees the sun is not just an object in space. It is a reflection of how the universe continues even when everything familiar is gone. A rogue planet carries no light, no warmth, no sign of activity that we can easily observe, and yet it remains part of the same reality that created stars, galaxies, and everything we know, proving that existence does not depend on visibility, but on the simple fact that something continues to be. Over billions of years, this world drifts through darkness, unchanged in ways we can measure, but constantly moving through a galaxy that never stands still, passing by distant systems, crossing invisible boundaries, and following a path shaped by forces that are always present, even when they cannot be seen. In this way, the rogue planet becomes something more than just a physical object. It becomes a symbol of continuity, a reminder that the universe does not require constant activity to exist, that it can hold within it places of complete stillness, and that those places are just as real and just as important as the brightest stars. This idea changes how we look at everything, because it shows us that what we perceive as emptiness is not truly empty, and that what appears silent is not truly without meaning. It is simply operating on a different scale, one that is slower, quieter, and far more subtle than anything we are used to. Rogue planets exist within that scale, moving through time in a way that is almost impossible to relate to, experiencing changes so gradual that they feel like permanence, yet still evolving in ways that connect them to the larger story of the universe. And that story is not defined by a single path, but by countless possibilities, by worlds that remain in systems, worlds that are ejected, worlds that are captured again, and worlds that are lost forever, each one contributing to the complexity of the cosmos in its own way. When we consider this, we begin to understand that the universe is not just a collection of objects, but a continuous process, a system where matter is constantly moving, changing, and reorganizing itself across vast distances and timescales. Rogue planets are part of that process, not as anomalies, but as natural outcomes, as pieces of a larger structure that extends far beyond what we can easily observe. And in that sense, a planet that never sees the sun is not separate from the universe. It is deeply connected to it, existing as one expression of the same fundamental laws that govern everything else. In the end, what we are left with is not just the image of a dark, frozen world drifting through space, but the understanding that even in the absence of light, even in the most extreme conditions, existence continues, shaped by forces that never stop, guided by principles that apply everywhere, and sustained by a balance that allows even the most isolated worlds to remain part of the endless and ever-evolving story of the cosmos. And even now, after everything we've explored, there is still one final layer to this story, a realization that changes not just how we see rogue planets, but how we see the universe as a whole, because a planet that never sees the sun is not just an extreme case. It is a quiet proof that existence does not depend on conditions, but on continuity. A rogue planet does not need light to continue. It does not need a system to define it, and it does not need to be seen to be real. It simply exists, moving through space as it always has, guided by the same forces that shape everything else. Over billions of years, it becomes something that is almost beyond our understanding, a world where change happens so slowly that it feels like permanence, where time stretches so far that events lose their meaning, and where motion is the only constant that remains. And yet, even in this state, the planet is not separate from the universe. It is part of it in the most fundamental way, responding to gravity, following a path, and existing within the same structure that holds galaxies together. This is what makes the idea so powerful, because it shows that nothing in the universe is truly isolated, that even the most distant and unseen objects are connected through the laws that govern motion and interaction, and that those connections exist even when they cannot be observed directly. Rogue planets remind us that the universe is not just what we can see, but also what we cannot, a vast hidden reality filled with worlds that move through darkness, each one carrying its own history, its own structure, and its own place within the larger system. And when we consider how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes almost impossible to comprehend, because if they are as common as we believe, then the majority of planets in the galaxy may never orbit a star at all, existing instead as silent travelers moving through the void. This shifts our perspective completely, showing us that what we observe directly is only a small part of a much larger picture, and that the universe is far more complex, diverse, and dynamic than it appears at first glance. In this hidden population, there may be worlds at every stage of evolution, some still holding internal heat, some completely frozen, some passing near stars, and others drifting forever without interaction, each one representing a different outcome of the same processes that form and shape planetary systems. And within this diversity, there is a deeper truth, that existence in the universe is not limited to a single set of conditions, but can take many forms, each one valid, each one capable of persisting over immense periods of time. Rogue planets are one of those forms, and they show us that even in the absence of light, even in the deepest darkness, a world can continue, can move, and can remain part of the endless structure of the cosmos. In the end, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a symbol of isolation, it is a symbol of the universe itself, a place where everything exists within a balance, where change is constant, and where even the most unseen objects play a role in the story that continues to unfold across billions of years, a story that extends far beyond what we can observe, but that includes everything, even the worlds that drift forever in the dark. And even beyond everything we've explored, there is still one final way to understand a planet that never sees the sun, not just as a physical object, but as a quiet reflection of the universe itself, because what these worlds truly represent is the idea that existence does not need to be observed, does not need to be illuminated, and does not need to belong to something greater in order to continue. A rogue planet moves through space without purpose as we define it, without direction chosen by anything other than gravity, and without change that we can easily measure. Yet it remains part of the same reality that shapes stars and galaxies. Over billions of years, it becomes something almost timeless, a world where the absence of light does not mean the absence of existence, but simply a different state, one where motion continues, where structure remains, and where the laws of physics operate exactly as they do everywhere else. This reveals something fundamental about the cosmos, that it is not dependent on what we can see, that it is not defined by brightness or activity, but by the continuity of matter and the forces that govern it. Rogue planets exist within that continuity, moving silently through the galaxy, connecting distant regions not through interaction, but through their presence, their motion, and their role in the larger structure of the universe. And when we begin to think about how many of these worlds might exist, the scale becomes almost unimaginable, because for every system we observe, there may be countless objects drifting in darkness, unseen and largely unknown, yet still contributing to the overall balance of the galaxy. These planets are not anomalies. They are natural outcomes, the result of systems that changed, of forces that acted over time, and of the constant motion that defines everything in the universe. Some of them may eventually encounter new systems, becoming part of something different, while others may remain isolated forever, continuing their journey without ever interacting with anything significant again. And yet, regardless of their path, they all share the same essential quality, the ability to exist without light, without connection, and without the conditions we usually associate with planetary life. This challenges our understanding in a profound way, because it shows that the universe is not limited to environments that resemble our own, but includes a vast range of conditions where matter can organize itself and persist in ways that are completely different. In this sense, a planet that never sees the sun is not just a scientific curiosity. It is a reminder that the universe is far more expansive, more diverse, and more complex than it appears when we focus only on what is visible. It tells us that there are entire worlds moving through darkness, carrying their own histories, following their own paths, and existing in ways that we are only beginning to comprehend. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this, that even in the deepest void, even in the absence of light, even in the most extreme isolation, existence continues, not as something extraordinary, but as something natural, something inevitable, something that is simply part of what the universe is. And at the very end of everything, when every idea has been explored and every layer has been uncovered, what remains is not just the image of a planet drifting in darkness, but a deeper understanding of what the universe truly is, a place where existence does not depend on light, on warmth, or on being part of something visible, but on the simple fact that matter continues to hold together within the laws that govern it. A planet that never sees the sun becomes the purest expression of that idea, a world stripped of everything that once defined it, yet still present, still moving, still part of the same cosmic structure that includes stars, galaxies, and everything in between. Over billions of years, it travels through space without ever announcing itself, without ever reflecting light that would make it easy to detect, existing in a state that is almost invisible, yet completely real. And this invisibility is what makes it so powerful as a concept, because it reminds us that the universe is not limited to what we can observe, that there are countless objects moving through space that we may never see, but that still contribute to the overall balance and evolution of the cosmos. Rogue planets are part of that hidden reality, a vast population of worlds drifting between stars, each one following its own path, each one shaped by the same forces that govern everything else, yet existing under conditions that are completely different from the planets we are familiar with. When we think about their journey, it becomes clear that they are not lost in the way we usually imagine. They are simply following a different path, one that does not require a star, one that does not require light, and one that allows them to exist independently for immense periods of time. This independence is not a sign of isolation in the negative sense, but a demonstration of how flexible and adaptable the universe can be, how it allows for a wide range of structures and conditions, each one valid in its own way. And within this flexibility, there's a kind of quiet order, a system where everything, even the most distant and unseen objects, still follows the same fundamental rules, still moves according to gravity, still exists within the same framework that holds galaxies together. This is what connects everything, from the brightest stars to the darkest rogue planets, a shared set of principles that ensure continuity, even in the absence of light or interaction. In this sense, a planet that never sees the sun is not separate from the universe. It is a direct reflection of it, a reminder that existence is not defined by visibility, but by presence, by structure, and by the ability to persist over time. And as we step back from this story, the final image becomes clear: a single world drifting silently through the vast darkness, carrying with it the memory of where it came from, and the possibility of what it might become. A world that may never be seen, but that remains part of the endless and ever-changing story of the cosmos, a story that continues far beyond what we can observe, far beyond what we can fully understand, and far beyond the reach of any light. And now, at the true end of this journey, everything returns to silence, the same silence that has always surrounded a planet that never sees the sun, a silence that is not empty, but filled with presence, with motion, and with the quiet continuation of existence itself. What began as a simple question about a world without light has become something far greater, a window into a universe that does not depend on visibility, that does not require illumination to exist, and that continues to evolve even in its darkest regions. A rogue planet is not lost, it is not forgotten, and it is not outside the system. It is simply part of a larger reality, where every object, whether seen or unseen, plays a role in the ongoing structure of the cosmos. Drifting through space for billions of years, it carries with it the memory of its origin, the forces that shaped it, and the moment when everything changed, when it left its star and entered the vast unknown. From that point on, its story became one of endurance, of persistence without guidance, and of movement without destination, a journey defined not by where it is going, but by the fact that it continues at all. And that is what gives it meaning, not in the human sense, but in the universal sense, as part of a system that is constantly moving, constantly changing, and constantly creating new forms of existence. Because in the end, the universe is not built only from light and energy, but also from absence, from darkness, and from the countless objects that exist beyond our ability to observe them directly. Rogue planets remind us that what we see is only a fraction of what is real, that beyond every star there may be worlds drifting unseen, and that the true scale of the cosmos extends far beyond anything we can fully comprehend. They show us that existence is not defined by connection to a star, but by the ability of matter to remain within the limits that allow it to hold together, even when everything else is gone. And perhaps the most powerful realization of all is this, that even in the deepest darkness, even in complete isolation, something can still exist, still move, and still be part of the universe. So when we look into the night sky, we are not just looking at the stars, we are looking past them, into a vast and unseen world filled with silent travelers, each one carrying its own story, each one moving through the endless void, and each one reminding us that the universe is far more than what we can see. It is everything that exists, even in the absence of light, even in the absence of sound, and even in the absence of anything that makes itself known. This is stellar depth.